Welcome back to Voices from the House of Sophia. Today we are delighted to have Britney Penouilh with us today. She's an amazing person. Actually, she's so intriguing. She's done so many things that resonate with myself. And as a practicing artist, and as a weaver of light, and a user and weaver of magical processes in terms of Earth magical systems, I think it's delightful to be able to listen to what she's got to say today. And as usual, I've got 10 questions. And I do apologize for my 10 questions because there was so much out there. I could have started to write another thesis, and yet I had to get this within an hour. So let's see what happened. And I'm sure there will be one of our usual beautiful conversations. But welcome, Brittany.
Thank you so much for having me. What a lovely intro. I'm
Well,
flattered.
I think that you've got so much to say that all I'm going to try and do is contain it somewhat, and then if we've got more to do, I think probably we could do a part two or something like that. It's absolutely fantastic. But let's see what we can do. So, just to give our listeners some idea of what we're going to do here, um, I came across a quote by Aristotle that Brittany actually likes. Okay. And Aristotle, apparently, although we never really know, but apparently he said to be conscious that we are perceiving or thinking is to be conscious of our own existence.
Mm.
Now that was on one of your sites, and I came across this and thought there's something about conscious acts and there's something about unconsciousness that is the life force of these things being entwined that cause us to do things. And in the quality of life as an artist, of which you are, and the quality of life as a magical practitioner, of which you are, you do have a foot in both realms of the consciousness and unconsciousness. And by what you do, it seems to me, is that you do certainly entwine these two features in a complex system. And I just thought that was such an immense thing. And it's something that I feel that the world needs this. The world needs this right now because we're stuck. And we're too stuck in the past. And we're not liberated enough to be free and wild enough to create the world we need for the future. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to invite you to the show, Brittany, because you do seem to emulate this energy for me. So I've got these 10 questions that I hope help you talk about who you are and something about what you do. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure. Yes, thank you.
That's okay. Right. Okay. Now let me drag you some years all the way back to about the age of 12. Okay.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yes. Well, you probably remember being 12 far quicker than I do, but there you go. But I think it was a point in your life where you learned to see the world in different planes, lines and shadows and textures and different dimensions. And at that age, you seemed to become aware of those things that were forming.
Mhm.
And at that moment, through studying and being aware of those things, you had this trajectory that points you towards things like geology and the connection with the earth. And in a way, I think you said somewhere, and I can't quote exactly where it's from, but I had this phrase, was I think you said the earth was better served as your muse. And I thought that was beautiful. So my question around this little bit is when did your art and science truly merge for you?
Mm-hmm. Ooh, oh, okay. In college, I studied fine art. And I always knew I was going to be an artist. I studied art as a kid. I was drawing, I was painting, I was in art classes, I won awards, and in college it was sort of a no-brainer. I continued the practice, and but as I was studying, I realized, wow, I need subject matter. Like, what is it that I'm most passionate about? What is the message I want to convey through the work that I'm creating? And one of the prerequisite classes I had to take was science course.
Hmm.
And always loving geology, it seemed like another no-brainer. So but then I really fell in love with geology. I mean, you also got credit to go on field trips, like to go camping and
Well,
collect rocks. And it's like, it's such a core memory as a child that I think anyone can relate to. But as I got deeper into it and started studying mineralogy and scanning electron microscopic images of worlds so tiny, micrometers small, that reflected things I would see in the everyday, architecture, stairwells, just, it's very much as above, so below. Like I
mm,
was seeing that
mm,
firsthand on a under a microscope and drawing these things. And I would say my second year of college
mm,
is really when I dove deep into the science realm and I started questioning my identity. Am I an artist or am I a scientist? It was very confusing, and so I sort of took a break from art for about a year and dove deep into science. I worked at a geology lab where they would send me bags of dirt and I was separating them to um, help determine a mining operation to drill in which direction. And so that bag of dirt they would send to me, I would separate the grain sizes. I would create
yeah.
these epoxy mounts. We would put them under an X-ray diffractor. We would count them by eye, and copper, gold, molybdenum. It was all ore materials. And a year of doing that and just being in the lab, and I got really bored. There was no room for like innovation in what I was doing or creativity. It was
Mm,
very rote material and precise, and so yeah, my mind started to drift a bit, and I realized, well, maybe I keep this part of my identity as something I can explore visually and communicate it in different mediums: painting, sculpture,
mm.
drawing. Um, it- yeah, I would say that's where it all began. At a deep level.
I mean, yes, I somewhere within that, I think it's quite delicately put, actually. I think something else is going on as well. I mean, if we consider this kind of juncture between the arts and science, and of course, for many years they were entirely separated. Art was seen as something far more mystical, and it's within you, and it's not for everybody, and you can't. And then science was kind of more delivered to us as kids as being a rigorous thing that has rules, and you can do this and you can't do that, and things like this. And then how do those things form together? Because they are related. I mean, I think if we take the word science anyway,
Mhm.
and we look at the idea of the word science, and it goes all the way back to the Latin, obviously, because it means "scire," it means to know.
Mhm.
And in terms of art, it's about a knowingness, isn't it? And in terms of science, it's about a knowingness. And actually, what is really lovely to think about is that how do these structures in science form a union with the fluidity of what art may be, which has its own structures, which are less rigid until we do something with it.
Well, there's a curiosity and an
There we go.
observation
That's that
and
word. That's it.
curiosity.
Perfect. Perfect. The Alice in all of us, right? Right. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah. Carry on.
Sorry.
Sorry. I
Oh,
cut you
oh,
there.
I was just thinking, you know, being able to okay, so I have the curiosity, but then I also sort of have the skill set to translate that curiosity into something
Ah.
visual communication.
Right.
And I think, I think, yeah, I think for me, the line of science and art is not as defined as and rigid as it has been for the last couple of hundred years. It's all sort of the same information. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we seem to do this to ourselves, right? I mean, I just think it's ridiculous. We kind of need to categorize and package things up so brutally. I mean, I was reading a book. I was reading a book this Christmas. I'm still reading the book, actually. I haven't finished it. And it's all about this lovely Italian guy. So it's very poetically written, obviously, because, Italiano, etc., right? And, you know, but what he writes about is about time, what time is. And he describes it as because we've become, because Newton really did it, but because people have categorized through time what time may be, it doesn't help us understand what it does, because it's what it does that really matters. And actually, to be honest, today with our understanding of quantum and things like this, it's becoming less structured by its unstructured nature of science. And therefore we're left with the idea of that if you dig right down to what actually happens with things, stuff, this bloody desk, right, which I'm tapping, actually it's not real. And actually time doesn't exist
mhm,
because there's no difference between past and future and all that cool stuff about you're at the desert, right? So
yeah,
in terms of that, time moves differently than it does at the top of a mountain. And it's
absolutely.
all that groovy, cool, scary stuff about, well, it's not about trying to prove and disprove. It's about the flow of what we're doing and how we're being part of that curiosity you mentioned. I mean, there was something else that I'll just mention this just so people understand. Is that you've worked in a lot of places, right, Brittany? I mean, from being the States in New Orleans and places like this, lovely place, I have to add, one of my favorite cities, actually. All
Yeah,
right, it really is. Um, oh, San Francisco was cool as well. I did enjoy myself there. I don't know, it's got a weird vibe, but
it's too
anyway,
cold for me.
yeah, well, it's just that kind of place. But then Greece has got is the kind of place, and Japan, which is so radically different from that. And I've visited Japan many times. I think I talked about that before. Alaska, I've never been, and we talked about the Mojave Desert. Okay, so all these different vibrations of different places would have had some influence on your understanding of things.
Mhm,
Um, and in terms of this vastly different landscapes, these vastly different energies, geological forces, getting back to the science thing.
mhm,
Um, and I think it must have had in some way, and you can tell me now about the influence of that in your visual language.
mhm.
I mean, what did he do?
So I sort of grew up in the swamp of Louisiana,
Yeah,
the exact opposite of the landscape I'm currently living in. That that's an interesting place. So below the Mississippi River, all of that land, I had this like experience when I moved to California, realizing like how young Louisiana, New Orleans area is, because that
right.
is just land built up over 8,000 years, sediment coming down the Mississippi River, slowly building up. There is no bedrock. It's just a delta, a swamp, the whole
Wow.
thing. And so, the bugs, there were no rocks, there are no seashells, like we have oyster shells. It was a very different terrain, but then coming to California. Oh, and the other thing is culturally it felt like an older city in Louisiana. So
Mhm.
geologically very young, culturally very old. In comparison to come initially I went straight to Los Angeles, and
Yeah,
culturally it's like there is no depth. Everything is whitewashed and removed and
yeah,
start over. So culturally so young, but geologically, 65 million years, different fault lines, geologically active, all these different landscapes of ocean and forest and beach and desert, all of like that was the playground I was suddenly playing on. But the desert specifically, I did an artist residency in the Mojave National Preserve,
Right.
and I lived in the desert. I got to pick when I wanted to live there. And I was like, okay, I want like authentic desert experience. Give me July. Give me
Right.
120 degrees in the summer and let me figure out like how do I exist here? And it did force me to think about different things like when you eat food in the middle of the day and it's that hot, it takes more liquid in your body. You are dehydrating yourself further because it takes more to digest the food. And so you start making little adjustments on how to survive the conditions. You eat different things at different times of the day, what you're doing, maybe you don't do it in the middle of the day, you do it early morning or late evening. Like you just adjust. And so I don't know. I feel like that really set me up for this
Mm.
adventure that I'm currently living on. And I just kept coming back to the desert. I also realized as a kid, I had dreams of being in the desert with my father. No one in my family's ever been in the desert, but the desert just felt so familiar. And since I've been here, there's been such a flow where things have just been unfolding and I'm meeting the right people at the right time. And it's teaching me the things I need to do in that moment. Because I'm completely homesteading. I bought land a few years ago and I'm starting completely from scratch with, water and solar panels and just kind of reconstructing what I want life to be outside of a system that is just renting and taxes and all this constriction and there's nothing left. So
I think that's fascinating, right? I mean, I don't know if you know, I mean, I love Carl Jung, right? I mean, I just something that's infiltrated my life in a massive way, apart from my own father, that I had an interesting relationship with my father, but he was super intelligent and was absorbed in Jungian motifs, most things. But one thing about desert that's kind of struck me was it feels to me like deserts in some sense, and I don't know. I mean, I've been to LA.
Mhm.
The only place that rocked my boat was when I went to the tar pits. I'm like, yeah, I like this place. I can deal with dead things and tar. It's good. And
Yeah.
then everywhere else is a million miles away from each other. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. Because I'm a Brit. Everything's 50 miles away, right? I don't do that. Or in Italy, right? So I'm like, yay, I'll go over there. But anyway, so, and that feeling of that, but when it starts to bleed out into deserts and things like this, it feels like the desert is truly one of those places that is that kind of unconscious realm.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's about where it's a place for individuation of the self. It's a place where you start, you truly start at where it's at.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter where, what, and wherever you experience is you're just there. You grow up from that bit or that part and that essence of the land. And this, you mentioned some things about that, and it's about confronting your own darkness and the shadow self and comes to terms with who you may be rather than who you want to be. It is who you are. And I think it's depicted in the Red Book of Jung's anyway. But I think that
Hmm.
it's a beautiful thing. It's like a soul's call. It's a barrenness, to excuse the pun, on deserts. It's that thirst for development. It's the it's the union between yourself and the shadow to understand. What something about the shadow work is to understand that you're not as bad as you think you are, really. And you have to confront your own demons and understand what they're really saying to you to overcome that. And then you go back into your ancestry quite rapidly to draw this stuff out. You become one and the same thing. So I find it quite absorbing, desert work.
The desert is a place of stillness and fully present in this moment. Like I am in the now more so here than anywhere else I've ever been.
Right. Right.
And where I'm specifically at, it's very quiet. Like crows pass over my place at a certain time every day, and when the wind isn't blowing, you can hear their wings flapping.
Right. Wow.
And then coyotes howling. I mean, it's an immediacy, of being here now. The city, it got to a point where I couldn't be there anymore. The
No.
vibrations after the fires in Los
Oh,
Angeles, the helicopters, the protests, like it was just um I felt like I was being suffocated, overstimulated, to the point where it was like I can't survive in this environment anymore.
right. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think life's like that for a lot of people right now. Is
Hmm.
that they're trapped in this, they can't do anything because they're trapped in the noise
Hmm.
of things. And to experience that in a lesser degree almost can be quite frightening for some because they get used to it and they don't experience what that's truly like. The language of the self.
Hmm. Yeah.
There is no room for that. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
But the way the system is working right now, it's like I don't think people are prioritizing a time for meditation and stillness and disconnecting. And that can be done anywhere, but it
Mm,
is sort of a commitment to self to do that, to recenter themselves on a daily basis.
mm, mm,
Grounding.
mm.
Yeah, I mean, that chaos, the noise, the vibrations, the constant deadlines, the traffic, it's just like, why? What are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite far away from being in connection with the self, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to drag us back to. I might come back to the desert, but I'm going to drag back to something that about your work. Um, almost. I think that I think your work for me, looking at the types of things you do, I've never seen it in reality. I've only seen things online, which are very different always. Um, but it seems to me that your work explores how landscape and natural disasters affect our reality. Feels that, and whilst I mean they do invoke these infinite monologues and lots of things, the physics of things, physics of natural things, geology, art, philosophy, religion, time, all those bad boys, right? There we are. They're all out there, and they kind of linked all these things together. Um, what do you think you want people to understand about our relationship with these forces?
Oh, in college, I did a lot of sort of religious studies, and one of the classes I took was The Bible is Literature, which was an extraordinary class. And I wrote a pretty in-depth article about um, God as a character, but how he, controls how natural disasters are looked at as God, basically. And there's such, like the way we live today, there's so much humility, but also we have this hubris that we can control everything around us. And
Oh,
it is sort of the things that we cannot control. We cannot control the wind. We cannot control the hurricanes. We cannot control geomagnetic storms coming off the sun. Like we are not in control, and we need to have humility and live in a different direction.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, there's something that this is what I'm saying, that it's these monologues we have with very different things. I mean, I've read a couple of your poems out there online. And we don't have a lot of time for this, but I do encourage people to look at your poems, because there are different ways we're communicating with things and communing with things that are important. And I think that within your poetry as well, and it is an art form, obviously, is that it does something where you have a more private connection to the things we understand through your poetry. And I think I'm probably going to put a couple of links where I found some of your poems out there. And I think that would be really good for our listeners to read as well, just so they can understand when they have moments of quietness and solitude, that it is a deeply rich time
mhm,
of understanding ourselves, that have
mm,
lost the path, or whatever we want to call it, so
mhm,
we can find our next steps. And there was a phrase that I was taught when I was a boy of my parents, and they were very interested in Sufism. And they said to me, don't be frightened, because you need to learn to put your foot out in the dark and trust something is there.
mm.
And still lasts for me today, when I'm not certain or I'm unsure. And I think, put your foot out,
Mm.
because even though it's hard, the smallest step is the way forward.
I love that. I also think, I would hope that more people could recognize the relationship they're building with everything they encounter
Yeah.
on a constant, a constant consciousness of how we're treating everything from trees to rocks to
Mm,
animals to spiders. I mean, like everything has a life and a consciousness and an energy and a vibration. And if we can think about building a better relationship with the inanimate
mm,
objects, I think
mm.
that can also affect
Yeah,
bigger relationships
I think
with
so.
ourselves, with the world around us.
Actually, it reminds me of a very funny story. About 10 years ago, we moved into this house. We've got this old Italian farmhouse, right? So we're constantly still building it. I don't think it'll ever end, right? And it goes on. But I remember some guy wanted to come round and fix the Wi-Fi and stuff like this. And we don't live near Turin, the city. So everything becomes impossible round about 3 kilometers out from the city. So anyway, this guy comes round and he said, "Oh yeah, we'll do this thing called Fast Web in Italy. It's get your line in, you can have your internet and stuff like this." And he came into we converted this cow shed into this office space, and we were in there, and this guy scratching his head, and he said, "Oh, we'll put it there." And she said, "Yeah, okay. Do you see that spider's web there with that spider?" She said, "Do what you like, but if you hurt my spider, right, I'm gonna hurt you."
Yes.
And he was like, "I finished. The spider's fine. I think I'll go now."
Yeah. I love it.
True. I mean, you do need to look after their worlds. It's not just us, and we're sharing. We're not. You don't dominate. You just share your spaces, and that's all right. And that's cool.
Yeah.
Nice, lovely. Um, I'm trying to stick to my questions. I could ask you all sorts of good stuff, right? But let's talk about doing stuff, right? Let's talk about that. All right. Um, Making things. Now you use quite specific materials in your work. Okay,
Mhm.
I noticed. So, from casted figures, plexiglass. I'm sure you've got lots to tell me there.
Yeah.
And etchings, right? Plexiglass and etchings. Found objects and maybe materials, earth materials. Is that the best way of putting it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, how do they express your geological and, well, it's an elemental concept, isn't it? In
Mm.
ways that traditional painting can't do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Can you tell us something about that?
Hmm. Um, well, I would say my first love would be drawing. And drawing became boring after a certain point. And so I think I cultivated a new love for drawing when I started exploring other materials and cast shadows and how I can create illusions on a, essentially it's technically a two-dimensional surface, but it feels very one-dimensional because it's one plane. But drawing on plexiglass and then having different light sources, you can almost animate a projection onto the wall.
Mm.
Um, and so yeah, it's been multi-layered in why I'm doing it, but also sort of a study of light and shadow immediately in the material that I'm collecting, that I'm working on. Um, plexi plexi specifically is it's an interesting material. Even casting in resin, these are petroleum based
Mm.
products, which are not great for the environment, but um having a reproduction of something organic that would naturally break down into a material that does not break down has a quality I
Mm.
can't explain
Mm.
without just showing it. It preserves it, it gives it this eternal life almost. I have
Oh,
a
oh, right.
sunflower that I grew that was 12 feet tall, and towards the end I cut its head off. I pulled out all the sunflower seeds and I made a cast of this Fibonacci sequence that naturally happens
Oh,
in
yeah.
the center.
Yeah.
It- it's so delicate, the resin crawls in and then it hardens and then I pull it out of the mold, and there are these very delicate shoots of where the seeds once were that are just perfectly preserved in this very thin layer of
Yeah.
plastic.
Right.
And
Yeah.
after a certain point that would break down in the sun and the rain, birds eating off of it. It's just like it it won't live forever. It's supposed to die, and
Right.
holding on to it longer, just I'm
Well,
attached.
it's that kind of that lovely stuff about transformation and transcendence of things, just as we are. We're not supposed to live forever.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like those echoes of that in the work. And I was just going to say that I was looking at these terrible questions, but I was looking at and this happened in the quarantine right era, wasn't it? And you planted this sunflower and you said grew 12 feet and all that kind of cool stuff. And there's something about shifting cycles really in your practice and move towards solar ritual work. Is that an okay way of putting
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
Um, so that path is something that just sort of, I don't think I can even take full responsibility of something I chose. It's something that kind of unfolded and it felt like it chose me in some way. So I, during quarantine, I planted sunflowers in Hollywood. We had this courtyard,
Yeah.
and I had never. My father had a green thumb. We always had a vegetable garden, but I had never really tried to nurture my own sort of
Mm.
planting process. And to my surprise, I was very good at it. The species I used was very tall, and it just became an annual ritual. There's a certain time of year after the last freeze that's really the best time to plant sunflowers, and then by the end of the summer you have a fully mature sunflower. But so I just continued to do that each year, and I think after the second or third year, um I was injured. This is like a very unpopular topic, but vaccine injured from one of my COVID vaccines. And it was a two-part injury that was like a physical injury because they did it in the wrong place, and then sort of a autoimmune injury. And it was years of trying to figure out why this is happening and what's going on. And I was part of some clinical trials with Yale and Stanford just to sort of study because there are other people that were having the same issues.
Mhm.
And simultaneously, while I'm like trying to heal from this injury, um, I think I started taking runic divination classes at the Crooked
Oh,
Path in Los
oh,
Angeles. And um, I was just making different objects. And there was this headdress that I just started to make. And a friend from the class was telling me about these solar deities that were feminine, not masculine, which is
right, right.
so refreshing. Like, please,
Yeah,
yes, we need the feminine energy.
yeah.
And so then I found myself studying these, Bronze Age sun cult goddess, the whole lineage of that. And so I really leaned into that. And my sunflowers took on another shape where I was making seed paper so that I can sort of offer it to other people. I've given it away as gifts, but encouraging people to write wishes and then plant the paper, and then the flowers grow from the paper. I created a persona and did some performances, which also was turned into photographs. And I did some sculptural pieces, which I was explaining. And I have a friend that's an astronomer who works at the Griffith Observatory, and he was like, huh, it's really interesting that you're doing this during solar maximum. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, yeah, every 11 years the poles reverse on the surface of the sun, and so that causes geomagnetic storms and coronal mass ejections, which on Earth we can see through the aurora borealis. And I was like, okay, now this is another layer of like sun practice that I need to know about. And there was um there was a pretty significant geomagnetic storm on June 1st of 2025. And one of my dogs has been sick with Cushing's disease
Oh,
for probably
right.
2 or so years. And he had a seizure on that day, but also I had a sunflower that prematurely opened. And then my father, who was growing sunflowers in Louisiana, had a sunflower that opened the exact same day. And so I'm like, I need to know more. And that took me down a path of like, migratory birds are disrupted by these geomagnetic storms because basically their internal GPS goes offline inside of their eyeball. They have this protein that is magnetic, and so they're like flying in weird configurations. Like there's a lot more
Great.
of an effect. Even blood volume can be affected by it.
Absolutely that. I mean, certainly in Europe,
Mhm.
there's a very stark affinity with the
Mhm.
goddesses, but the goddess encompassing. I mean, my wife's new book all about Hecate, a beautiful book she's just finished. Um, and all where we live, all our stuff is very land based. We live by the seasons, and we live by Hecate anyway. But as a very old goddess, harks back to even Neolithic times, to 10,000 years BC and stuff like this. And we do honor that, Suna,
Mhm.
soul. But if you think about it, Suna and soul together are what we need.
Yeah.
And even if things like Mithras and cults like this and Greek cults of that, I mean, I remember not too long ago, before we couldn't go for a while, in Lebanon, there is a place called Baalbek. Have you heard of that place?
Mm-mm.
Baalbek has some unbelievable temples, but they're built on something much older. Some of these slabs of rock, no one really knows how they did that,
Mm.
but there is some very ancient energy we begin to tap into. And something I won't go on about this, but something that I felt was really important, even in Egyptology, was the god behind the god.
Ooh.
Yeah. So we're talking about the very brilliant concepts of, you know, um, the goddess and the god entwining to become the spark of the universe in terms of their procreation and things like this. And I think that when we look at the impact of this soul and sooner deities, this is what we're moving towards in terms of what is happening. One doesn't negate the other, but on the other hand, let's not neglect one part of it because of patriarchal crap, right, that goes around and gets in our way a lot of the time. So it's just really lovely to hear, and it's actually becoming part of your work. So when you talk about something that becomes something that's going to stand the test of time,
Mhm.
it's like the beginning of Space Odyssey, you know, where it's like, oh my God, that thing landed here and it's been here forever. And
Yeah.
it's that thing that reminds it needs to remind us of our point of being. It's the reason for being here in the first place. It's not to fight it, it's to be part of it and to understand what those things are. I mean, yeah, we are going through turbulent times. It's horrific, horrific, right? And but I do feel it's an astronomical kind of necessity to get through so we can understand what we don't want. You know,
I
for those
I
sidereal things.
mhm.
Hmm.
I think that we are experiencing a lot of loss and grieving,
Yes.
but in order to take on, our hands are full with the life that we once had that is slowly dying, and suddenly our hands will be empty to grab this next thing that's coming.
I mean, do you feel there's a this is a stupid is this stupid? Maybe it is, but I'll ask you anyway. Right. Is there a line between your artistic expression and your spiritual practice? Is that horrible?
I I don't know. I don't think there is a line. I think they're intertwined for sure. I think hmm I'm just thinking in this moment, you know, the practice that I do alone and the practice that I do outwardly that I share with other people. Yeah, I don't think there isn't a line between the two. There isn't much of a boundary. I think it overflows, and I don't really hold back, what I'm doing alone. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yes, it
I
does.
feel like I feel like I share what I'm doing.
Oh no, I
Um,
think that's yeah, I think that's cool. I like that. Yeah,
mhm,
I like that. I think that there's something you described somewhere about we wanted to connect with people in such a way. And for me, it's kind of as you're making something, if you make anything, it's a visceral and emotional happening. It
mhm,
works on those levels which are underneath our thin persona of what we clumsily do every day. Okay. And I think that when creating this visual dialogue that you do, I'm going to put some photographs that I'm going to steal them and put them on the front end of this website because people
Go
need
for
to
it.
understand what we're talking about here, right? People need to go and have a look at this stuff. But it pulls you down go back to Alice. It pulls you down the rabbit. I love Alice books, of course. And it pulls you down the rabbit hole, right? And I think what it does is it offers what experience might look like. Is that is that okay to say that? What journeys, what journeys are we on? And in terms of you, you are on your own journey, but because you make things, you lead people down that rabbit hole with you. You're
Mm,
always ahead, but
mhm,
they lead you down that to take a look at themselves and your work as a combination of something that might happen. And as a person that makes things, what do you want to happen? from the
Mm.
person that experiences your work?
Um, well, I would love for, hmm,
Mm,
that is a good question because I can almost see certain works emulating different responses, but bigger picture, just like slowing down and reconsider, the materials, the life that we're living. Like there's such an impression it
mm,
has on us and we have on it, and we're shaping that constantly, through actions, through words. Um, hmm.
mm.
It's so intuitive, the things that I'm doing, that I don't always stop and think about this sort of
I
thing.
think in a way that's the beauty of it all, really, is the fact that you're doing. There's quite a big difference between thinking about doing something and doing it. And
Hmm.
I think that's something I suffer from all the time is I procrastinate a hell of a lot. And to actually do something at all, or when I'm actually doing it, if in fact I also consider it as a bit of a goal because I've got off my arse and I'm actually doing it rather than talking about it or reading about it or thinking about it or doing anything but then just yeah, well, there it is now. Your canvas is still there looking at you, but no, you've done everything else but. So it's that kind of horrible kind of self-abuse. But anyway, it's
I
like,
think I think like there is a degree where I think about the thing I want to do, but then I don't let it lead to analysis paralysis. I just
hmm,
like I think about it, and then once I have a vision, that vision is clear enough for me to just tackle it. And then as I'm working on the thing, whatever that may be, it takes on different shapes and a different life,
hmm.
sometimes a totally different outcome than what I imagined. But yeah, that only comes from tackling it.
I mean, that's, yes, you're actually you're moving towards a question I was going to ask you, but let's put it like this: if you had an advice for people that are creatively in tune with things, no matter what,
Mhm.
I think you mentioned two things. One I was struck by for yesterday for quite a while is you mentioned something like divine timing and things like this,
Mhm.
and something about risk taking towards timing and growth. I mean, what would you say to people that make stuff?
Mm. Oh, those things with divine timing. Um, that was sort of that was when I chose to leave the city and I was coming to the desert, and I realized, things were falling into place much quicker because I was moving in the right direction. So it's almost like blindly moving in space and just using your other senses,
Oh,
um, to navigate the direction. But yeah, it was like, new levels are being unlocked.
right.
Like I need to figure out how to do this. Well, this person just magically appears in my life and has all the answers, and that led to this next thing. And it's just sort of unfolding rapidly, and it took me kind of committing to the path that I already wanted to be on. It was this maybe fear or not feeling prepared and just diving into it. And
Hmm.
now there's such a flow and a ease that I didn't realize was missing, or that I could have, that was so attainable. Um,
Right.
yeah, so I do think it is like, following this like intuition of where the path is leading you, instead of, trying to put logic over things and plan things and force things into what you think it should be.
Hmm.
Lead a little bit less with the mind and more with the heart.
Mm. Yeah.
The Freemasons
Yeah.
had a sort of like a symbolism and a thing. They said, whatsoever the hand may do, may the heart go forth in unison.
Yeah.
And I think that's really an important alignment.
I mean, I think the Freemasons are quite important. My dad was a Mason, and
Mhm.
I think that it's quite interesting about the bright side of that, of those kinds of ideas, and the dark side of Freemasonry, which is just not helpful in any sense of the imagination. However, building the temple of the self and building the temple so it aligns with the temple of the universe, and we are the constructors of that and the union of that and the upholders of humanity. There's some
Mhm.
really important things that I think have been lost along the way somewhere, but I think that phrase there kind of encapsulates the intention of what we can do for each other. I think that's good.
I I think I think yeah, the Masons can be complicated. So I didn't mean to bring it up in controversy,
That's
but
the word. Complicated, yeah.
yeah, it is complicated. And I think that they're the operative and then they're the speculative, and I
Yes.
would probably identify more with the operative, the actual builders, than the speculative or more the lobbyists. Like so yeah, just to clarify, yeah, I didn't mean to
No, no,
conflict.
no, no. I really do understand where you're coming from. It's the idea of temple
Hmm.
is very, very spiritual in all of us in very many different ways and through history and things like this.
Hmm.
And alongside that, there's something about um, constructing the idea of the self,
Hmm.
deeply philosophical way. And ritual is important in all sorts of magical systems in many different ways, and people do different things because they feel that they need to understand it in those ways. Uh,
Hmm.
but I think there is a very big connection with the idea of making something happen
Hmm.
is is at the base of temple construction of something, and I think just going back to the desert actually
Hmm.
is that this is a lay of the land for something to happen.
Hmm.
I mean, I was going to say that, I'm coming to the end of my stupid questions. But anyway, I don't know. They get us there, don't they? But I think that, when I think about what you're doing and think about your work, it's like this encompassing of earth and sun
Hmm.
with the divine feminine. And there's a geological deep time, isn't there? And there's a spiritual side of this, and there's solar cycles. Oh, and ritual and objects and material forces that we work with and work against to do something. And there's your life as the artist. Um, I mean, do you think you consciously work through elemental forces?
I think I unconsciously work through elemental
Right.
forces. Um,
I mean, what draws you forward?
what draws me forward?
Mm.
Magnetism, gravity.
Wow. Right.
it's it's something that, I'm not planning. It's a feeling, it's a knowing. Um, like my future for this place in the desert is to build super adobes. Are you familiar with this form of
Yeah.
construction? Yeah,
I
made of
have
the earth.
seen some photographs that you've put up there. It's very
Yeah.
helpful.
There's a place here in Hesperia that teaches people how to build in this way, and the founder of this campus was from Iran, and he was an amazing
Ah,
architect
damn.
and would
Fantastic.
use Rumi quotes. Everything
Great.
was like the principle of design is based on how Rumi saw, the elements and the forces of nature and living
Yeah.
with earth, living in a home made of the earth to withstand the elements of the earth. And yeah, I mean, like, it's sort of part of the dream here, and it's completely sustainable. If it catches on fire, it's actually stronger because it's essentially pottery. Earthquake proof because it goes into the earth, it's anchored. Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like, right now that's sort of the focus and the goal, and this is the place. And I kind of don't question those things. I just accept it as this is the destiny. This is the path I'm on, and I just must do these things.
I mean, I think that Rumi, wow. So having worked in Afghanistan quite a bit, I do come across a lot of Rumi
Mhm.
ideas, etc.,
Mhm.
and various parts of that world anyway, in terms of Persia and stuff like this, Mesopotamia even.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that, oh God, this is massive. I think there's something about this understanding of the self and looking at the systems that are so archaic and yet they're so important. I mean, even down to, I mean, Rumi. There's a question about as one person or many, but I think that the ideas of Rumi to understand what we're trying to do was always a question to the self. And we even touch on people like Gurdjieff and stuff like this, that we're not using the centers we need to use, and we need to connect like cogs into the center that is the most appropriate for what we're trying to learn. Because if we don't, we're using the wrong center and this. So it's a lovely you mentioned that actually. I mean, a lot of your work, I could be wrong here, but it feels like there's certain moves towards creating devotional items in some way,
Mhm.
and that is to do with this imbuing of love and light.
Mhm.
The most powerful magical systems we have is love
Mhm.
and light, and they're ritualistic because that's what you're doing and you're making things, okay? And it does invite others once they connect with your work, even though it might be online, even. And for me, it's very powerful. Um, that they do. I think they cast their own solar rituals for
Mhm.
themselves. I mean, what responsibility do you feel about offering these tools? I mean, what's your?
Oh no, that is definitely part of the path. I'm actually working on. There's like a
Oh
ritual
wow! I wish everybody could
map.
see this. Oh, hang on. I'll tell you what. Let me just see if I can grab that in some.
I can also send it to you.
I'll do, but actually, what
Yeah.
would be nice? No, no, just hold it there. I'm just going to take. Wait.
It's okay.
Got it. I'll put that up before you.
So
Yeah.
it is something that I am committed to offering because it's like, there's some illumination along this path that is working for me and helping me um heal from what I've been through. And I would love nothing more than to help other people along that path. And so it's working for me. This will have its own sort of manifestation in a couple of different objects, and then instructions on how to use it. Since I've moved, it's been a process of putting my life back together, like in this new place, but starting from scratch. My studio is in a shipping container that's not, or sea container, and it's not temperature controlled. And so the summer I couldn't be in there. It was like
Oh,
150 degrees. It's, I'm having a couple of like, oh, I have to figure this out before I can do this. And so I am still doing some things in a different capacity, but in the next couple of months, I think this will be fully matured. And it does pay focus to the solar cycles, primarily the four of the winter solstice,
Right.
the vernal equinox, the summer
Yeah.
solstice, and the autumnal equinox. And just the celebration of light and its progression and, you know, the life that it gives us, and it's this natural, you know, cycle of seasons, and how it affects us, the temperature outside, the food we harvest, everything is based on the light of
Yeah.
the sun.
Yeah. 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 Yes. In some ways, it's very Luciferian at the same time. So yeah. Yeah. Lovely. Well, I'm just looking at the clock, and I'm just protecting your time as well. So what I'm going to ask you next is, so what is next for you?
I do have a visual art show. It'll be a solo show in Los Angeles at Gallery 515. I don't have a date just yet. It is to be determined, but I will post that on the web once it's materialized. And then I have a website, divinitiesoflight.com. It's divinities-of-light.com. And here you'll find seed paper and different devotional objects that I've been making, you know, through
Right.
this journey. And I was doing very well blogging every Sunday as like a celebration of the sun, and then it got a little complicated with the move and a couple of things, but I do plan to be back on track with that next year in 2026. So yeah, divinitiesoflight.com, and there'll be an art show coming up soon.
Well, I'll put that link on the front of the podcast so everybody can see that, and then a couple of others I think would be good. And I'll stick some images if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yep.
Fun. And then
Um,
maybe later on in 26, let's do another one, see where you're at. Okay.
I love that. Yes, that'd be great.
Is that okay?
Yes. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's been lovely. I mean, we've just touched the surface of all sorts of good stuff. And I think we could probably explore a lot more. But you've been very generous about talking about what things mean to you. And I think it's going to touch a lot of people out there. So I know this podcast goes, well, across Europe, goes to the States. I know people are listening to that already. I think you know people. Scarlett listens to it. I know she does, and some others, and that's nice. And it goes right across the other side to some other people too. So you know, I do want people to look at your stuff. I want people to enjoy what that is. If they've got any comments for me, that'll be absolutely fantastic, and I'll pass them along to you. But for now, I'm going to draw a little show to the end today. But thank you so much. All that way over there, 9 hours or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There we are.
Thank you so much.
No,
This
it's
has
been a
been
real
a delight.
pleasure. Real
Yeah.
pleasure. So we hope to meet you sometime. You never know. And go well, Brittany. Okay.
Thank you. Happy Sunday.
It's still Sunday, right? Happy Sunday.
Okay, bye.